There exists a particular species of loneliness that defies easy recognition. It doesn't announce itself with tears or dramatic isolation. Instead, it moves quietly through a person's life, camouflaged behind forced smiles, relentless productivity, and a convenient excuse. I've just been really busy lately. But beneath this carefully constructed facade lives an ache that refuses to fade, a persistent emptiness that gnaws at the edges of awareness. This isn't the loneliness of physical solitude. This is something far more insidious. It's the crushing realization that you exist in a state of profound invisibility. That if you vanish tomorrow, days or even weeks might pass before anyone noticed your absence. That when something extraordinary happens, triumphant or devastating, you find yourself paralyzed, unable to identify a single person who would truly want to hear about it. This silence doesn't arrive suddenly. It accumulates gradually, quietly, like sediment settling at the bottom of a lake. It's not loud, it's not desperate, but it is constant, relentless, unchanging. And over time, this silence begins to fundamentally alter your consciousness, reshaping how you think, how you perceive yourself, and how you navigate the world around you. Society holds certain assumptions about people without friends. We imagine them as cold, deliberately antisocial, fundamentally uninterested in human connection. But this narrative is rarely accurate. Often, the truth is precisely the opposite. Sometimes these individuals care too intensely. They observe with painful clarity. They detect every microscopic shift in conversational tone, every subtle fluctuation in emotional energy, every smile that fails to reach someone's eyes. They are emotional seismographs, registering tremors others never notice. And after accumulating enough of these observations, after being disappointed enough times, they begin to withdraw. Not because they despise humanity, but because connection has become psychologically dangerous. The neuroscience here is fascinating and tragic. When isolation extends too long, the human brain begins interpreting aloneness as an existential threat. It activates the same neural regions associated with physical pain. Loneliness doesn't merely hurt emotionally. It manifests as genuine physical suffering. Your cardiovascular system responds. Your heart rate becomes irregular. Sleep becomes fragmented and shallow. Your mind develops hypervigilance, scanning for threats in environments where none exist. This response is evolutionary. The human brain developed within tribal structures. For our ancestors, prolonged isolation meant death. Yet here we are in the modern world, surrounded by thousands of digital connections, drowning in notifications and followers, while feeling utterly, devastatingly unseen. Because attention is not connection. Validation is not intimacy. There exists a profound difference between being known and being understood, and those without friends comprehend this distinction better than anyone. This path toward friendlessness rarely involves conscious choice. Nobody wakes up one morning and deliberately decides, "I will need no one." Instead, it unfolds slowly through an accumulation of small betrayals and disappointments that compound over years. You share something vulnerable and someone laughs. You entrust someone with a secret and they weaponize it. You attempt to open up, but your words seem to fall into a void of incomprehension. Eventually, your brain learns a devastating lesson. It is safer not to try. So you stop initiating contact. You stop reaching out. You begin constructing a narrative where you genuinely prefer solitude. And initially, you might even believe this story, because solitude can feel genuinely peaceful for a time. It offers control. It provides space. It creates predictability. But there's a truth about solitude that reveals itself only after enough time passes. It transforms from healing into haunting. Because fundamentally, humans are neurologically wired for connection. Even the most fiercely independent soul still craves recognition, mirroring the sensation of being felt by another person's presence. When years pass without this, something peculiar occurs internally. Your internal dialogue becomes louder than the external world. You begin conversing with yourself constantly, not aloud, but through an endless stream of thoughts. You replay old memories like worn videotapes, old friendships, old betrayals, endlessly analyzing where everything went wrong. Sometimes you conclude it's your fault. Sometimes you blame the world. But most often, it's neither. It's simply the complex, painful intersection of human psychology, and human suffering. Psychology has identified a phenomenon called learned social helplessness. It occurs when you've attempted connection so many times and failed that you unconsciously stop trying altogether. Your brain creates a neural association. Reaching out equals rejection. So even when you later encounter genuinely good people, kind, open, emotionally available individuals, your psychological defenses remain firmly in place. You might consciously tell yourself you're fine with isolation, but somewhere deep in your unconscious, you're still desperately yearning for that one person who simply gets it. That one person who doesn't require endless explanations. Yet paradoxically, the more intensely you want this, the more impossible it feels to find. Because loneliness possesses a cruel power. It makes you feel fundamentally unworthy of friendship. It whispers poisonous suggestions. You're too much. You're too intense. You're not interesting enough. It convinces you that other people have more important things to do than spend time with you. And eventually, these whispers become your internal truth. You begin rejecting yourself preemptively before anyone else gets the opportunity to. You isolate not from pride or preference, but from psychological protection. But here's what's psychologically fascinating. Loneliness doesn't always present as sadness. Sometimes people without friends appear completely functional. They smile appropriately. They maintain employment. They create things. They even post cheerful photographs on social media. But internally, they inhabit two separate realities, the one the world observes and the one they actually experience. They've constructed a version of themselves engineered to survive without connection. But this version often feels hollow, like they're watching their own life from outside their body, a spectator in their own existence. It's easy to judge people who have no friends, to label them as weird, difficult, emotionally stunted. But if you listen carefully to their stories, you'll consistently find threads of quiet heartbreak. Moments where they gave too much of themselves to people who didn't care enough to reciprocate or stay. Over time, this heartbreak shapes their entire identity. They begin associating intimacy with danger, vulnerability with regret. So they learn to exist without these things. But the cost of this adaptation is extraordinarily high. Without genuine friendship, your world contracts. Your emotions begin echoing only within your own mind, creating a psychological chamber where thoughts amplify and distort. There's no one to challenge your perspective, no one to soften your harshest thoughts about yourself. Psychologists have documented that prolonged social isolation can actually reduce empathy, not because people stop caring, but because they stop practicing emotional exchange. Empathy functions like a muscle. When unused, it atrophies. So people who live alone for extended periods sometimes become emotionally numb, not by choice, but by psychological necessity. It's the brain's protective mechanism against the unrelenting pain of unmet connection. Yet something paradoxical emerges. The very people who have no friends often crave deeper friendship than anyone else. They think about connection with unusual depth. They analyze it. They romanticize it. They search for meaning in every small interaction, every passing smile. Because when something is rare, you begin treasuring even the smallest fragments of it. But loneliness doesn't just affect emotions. It fundamentally alters behavior. Research demonstrates that people isolated for long periods become hypervigilant to social cues. They overanalyze text messages. They assume disinterest where none exists. They read between lines that were never written. Because when you've been rejected or forgotten enough times, your brain begins scanning for rejection everywhere, even where it doesn't exist. This creates a self-fulfilling psychological loop. You become cautious. People sense this caution as emotional distance. They assume you're uninterested or cold, and they pull back, thereby reinforcing the very loneliness you're desperately trying to escape. It's not your fault. It's simply how the human mind attempts to protect itself from repeated pain. What's particularly fascinating is how loneliness distorts time perception. When you have no one to share moments with, time begins feeling slower, heavier. Days blur together indistinguishably. You stop differentiating weekends from weekdays, holidays from ordinary days, because these temporal markers only possess meaning when shared. Psychological research has confirmed that loneliness literally alters how we experience time passing. Minutes feel longer. Hours carry more weight. Because when you're disconnected from others, you're living inside your thoughts rather than in the natural flow of life itself. And yet, within this silence, something potentially beautiful can emerge. Because solitude, when approached consciously and intentionally, can become profoundly transformative. Some of history's most self-aware, creative, and emotionally intelligent people spent extended periods in solitude. The critical difference is whether that solitude is chosen or forced. Chosen solitude heals and expands. Forced solitude hardens and contracts. One helps you reconnect with your authentic self. The other convinces you that you don't deserve to connect with anyone else. For many people without friends, it's not always clear which form they're experiencing. They say things like, "I'm just not a people person," or "I genuinely prefer being alone." But deep down, they miss the kind of laughter that only happens with someone who truly understands you. The kind where you don't monitor your words before speaking. The kind where silence feels warm rather than suffocating. It's easy to forget that friendship functions as more than mere socializing. It serves as a mirror. It reflects back aspects of yourself that you might never perceive in isolation. Without friends, it becomes significantly harder to know if you're growing or how you're changing, because we don't solely become ourselves in isolation. We become ourselves through reflection. And when that reflection is absent, you can begin feeling unreal, like you're moving through life in a fog where your existence echoes nowhere. That's the quiet, persistent pain of people without friends. Not just the pain of loneliness itself, but the pain of invisibility, the ache of existing without witness. Yet beneath that pain lies extraordinary depth and empathy. Because they know viscerally what it feels like to be unseen, they tend to see others with unusual clarity. They're often the ones who notice when someone is excluded. They're the ones who quietly check in on others, because they understand the weight of going unnoticed. And perhaps that's the paradox of this particular loneliness. Those who have no friends often make the very best ones, if only someone would take the time to truly see them first. There comes a moment, often arriving quietly, when someone who's lived too long in loneliness begins realizing that waiting to be found might not be enough. That perhaps healing isn't about finding people first, but about remembering who you were before the silence began. Because genuine friendship can only flourish where self-trust already exists. The human mind possesses remarkable resilience. It can learn connection again. Social trust can rebuild itself slowly through tiny acts of courage. Smiling back when someone makes eye contact, answering messages instead of overthinking them, allowing yourself to say yes even when you're frightened. It's not about forcing social confidence overnight. It's about allowing life to touch you again, one small interaction at a time. If you're someone without friends right now, please understand this fundamental truth. You are not broken. You are not unworthy. You are simply in the middle of your becoming. There will come a day when you'll sit across from someone who looks at you and says, "I feel like I've known you forever." And in that moment, all the years you spent wondering what was wrong with you will suddenly make sense. You'll realize that solitude was never punishment. It was preparation. Every quiet night, every unanswered text, every invisible ache was shaping you into the kind of person who could finally hold real connection when it arrived. Connection isn't about finding perfect people. It's about finding honest ones. The ones who can sit with your silence, laugh at your imperfections, and see the beauty in your complexity. Until then, walk gently with yourself. Speak kindly to the person in your mirror. And remember, even if no one is standing beside you right now, you are still worthy of being known. You are still worthy of friendship. You are still part of humanity's invisible thread, connected always, even in your quietest moments. Because loneliness isn't the end of your story. It's just the place where your next chapter begins.